Okay, chapter 7, day 1. This is the day 1 video. So what we're going to focus on is a little bit away from the quadratic stuff that we've been working on, and we're going to look now at exponents and powers. So we got to look at what are the exponent rules. I know you've done some of these back in 9th grade, or back in Algebra 1, I mean, but it's been a couple of years. And how do we use the rules to simplify expressions and solve equations? So the first thing is we're going to go through some vocabulary around negative exponents. So I know you did this in Algebra 1, but we're going to recap. So if I take anything and raise it to a negative power, right? Anything raised to a negative power means I'm going to move this to the denominator, keep the same power. Anything else that's on top that's not to the negative exponent stays there. In this case, there's only a 1 there. So this is the answer. Okay? Anything to a negative exponent, if it's on the top, it moves to the bottom. If it's on the bottom, it moves to the top. So for example, this, b is not raised to a negative exponent, so that would stay. Negative exponent, well, it's on the bottom. I move it to the top, keep the same exponent. What's left on the bottom, in this case, is a 1. I really don't write it like that then. I'll write it as b times x to the a. Okay? If I have a whole fraction raised to a negative exponent, that's the same as raising x to the negative exponent and raising y to the negative exponent. Well, again, if this is raised to a negative exponent, if it's on the top, it moves to the bottom. Keep the exponent, but no longer is negative. If this is on the bottom, it moves to the top. Keep the exponent, no longer negative. I could also, if I wanted to, write that as y over x to the a. It'll take a fraction, and a negative exponent inverts the fraction, or takes the reciprocal of that fraction. All sorts of things we have to do. We have to be able to rewrite without negative exponents. So sometimes a question might say, rewrite this without negative exponents. So first thing we're going to do is move the bases with the negative exponents to the top or bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to write this with my fraction bar. All right? If it's negative, I have to move it. If it's positive, I keep it. So x squared, that's positive. Keep it. But move anything that's negative. Y to the negative third, I'm going to move that down below. Whoops. When I move it, the exponent becomes positive. Z to the fourth, that stays. On the bottom, x to the negative fifth, this is negative, I'm going to move it, x to the fifth. I move it, power stays the same, but now it's positive. Y squared, that is positive, it stays where it is. Z to the first stays where it is. So, move them. Move the bases with the negative exponents to the top or bottom of the fraction, opposite of where it currently is. But then take away the negative sign. Okay? Second thing, simplify the powers of the same base. So now I got to go back, just like we did earlier in this year, and simplify. So I got x squared x to the fifth. That's going to be x to the seventh. Z to the fourth. Y to the third. Y squared is y to the fifth. Remember, when we multiply, we add exponents. This is z to the first. Now we can reduce z to the first, z to the fourth. This one's going to get crossed off. This one's going to turn to a 3. So this turns into x to the seventh, z to the third, all over y to the fifth. And that will be the answer. So when the question says rewrite without negative exponents, you're just moving anything with negative top to the bottom. If it's in the bottom, move it to the top. And then simplify using our general exponent rules. One other thing we're going to look at is fractional exponents. So, if I raise something to a fractional exponent, one thing we keep in mind is the top of the fraction is called the power. The bottom is called the root. Top is power, bottom is root. So x to the a over b I can write as x to the a, that's the power, to the root of b. Okay? If that's a 3, that's a cube root. If that's a 4, that's a fourth root. But the root is here. Now, we do in this case we would do the power first, and then we would take the root second if we were evaluating it. All right? We could also write this as x to a certain root, all raised to a certain power. Again, power, root. In this case, we would do the root first, and then do the power second. So when I'm evaluating, it just depends on what's easier to use in terms of what I do first or second. So I could write it like this, or I could write it like this. A little note though. If I see a square root, take this out for a second, and I do not see a number here, okay? We call that square root, all right? If it's a 3, we call it cube root. A square root really does have a number, it's 2, but the 2 is never written, okay? Just like if I say x to the first, we never write the 1. If I say square root of x, we never write the 2, but it's there, we just never see it. And because of that, if I want to write this as a fractional power, the power on top on x is 1, the root is 2. And so one of the things to really keep in mind is the fact that the square root of x is really x to the half power, and that will be used a lot as we go throughout this unit. All right? So square root of x is x to the half power. This is a thing to note and keep in mind. So problems like this might say, simplify. Okay? Simplify. Oops. So, power root. Power root. I put the 8 under the sign. Power root. Root, power. Simplify. I take 8 and square it. So that's the cube root of 64. So what times what times what is 64? Well, that's 4. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. Or, again, I could try root power. I could try it either way. Cube root of 8. I know what that is. Cube root of 8 is 2. Squared is 4. So, for some people, if I can take the root, I'll take it first if possible, because it reduces this number down to something more manageable. Okay? So if I can take the root first, I will do that. So root first if possible. I can go backwards and write this as a radical. 5 to the 1/2. Power root. I don't usually write the 2 and I don't usually write the 1, so I write this as the square root of 5. Power root.
Jennifer Johannes and Haley Balcom, please report to the Career Center.
That's what we're going to be working on during class.